Okay, good afternoon or good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. My name is Steve Hill, CEO of AIQ Systems. This is a 45-minute Zoom session. The recording is on and transcript too, so I'll make it easy for you to step back through what we'll be doing in this session. We're going to be covering a combination of things here. We're going to be taking the AIQ Trading Expert Pro Expert Design Studio and using that to create indicators as part of a strategy approach, but also incorporating what we have done in a session back in December, or no, it was January, I think, on AI. Since I've started using AI within the trading design environment, things have gotten, busier. A lot more traders are involved in using AIs to flesh out strategy ideas and to pass them by the AI before incorporating it into a testing strategy within whatever trading platform they may be using. So today, what I've done is I've gone ahead and used Claude. Claude by Anthropic is the most useful, I would say, tool that I've seen so far for collaborating on the testing, designing, and doing what I would call the heavyweight lifting of the coding of a strategy or an indicator in the Expert Design Studio. These sorts of coding can be done using our builder within we have a WYSIWYG builder within the system itself that can allow you to build some of this. The amount of time and effort you put into building it and hand coding it as well is obviously where the AI comes in and literally saves you hours and hours of time. And the other way I use it, not just for the coding, but also for the suggestions of strategies, the suggestions of indicators. And with a little bit of a coaxing, it's possible to take something like Claude and build several strategies that with a little bit of fine tuning. In fact, one of the indicators I looked at earlier, Claude created, had no errors in it whatsoever, which was an advancement over from what I've been doing in the past. Give you an idea when you start using something like an AI to assist in designing, if you're using it within Trading Expert Pro, for example, and I've said this before in the last session, you need to tell it what it is that AIQ EDS is, Expert Design Studio. The tool itself was unknown to Claude until I uploaded all the manuals, and this includes all of the syntax and all of the examples that are actually on the support page, and I'll just show you that to you if you want to do this. Although I have to tell you that I'm using Claude here in a purely public domain, so it may already remember out there in the public domain that it knows how to code in EDS. But if it doesn't, you can literally go to the support area on the site here. In fact, the best place to go is to get to the manuals themselves, the user manual here. Because it can't actually read videos, sending it sections of the user manual, Introduction Expert Design Studio, you can download this PDF, the basics, all of these PDFs, you can send that up to Claude and say, hey, this is AIQ Expert Design Studio. I want you to learn how to code in this. And then we'll go from there. And I've done that already. And over the period of time I've been doing this, the AI obviously gets updated. Claude's been updated along the way. I went out and, it's recommended to build yourself a skill. This is the AIQ skills and capabilities I have up here in Claude. And let me just do this. I need to move the sidebar here. Give me a second there. So the skill set actually is not in that area there. I'll get to that in a moment. But the skills themselves, you can ask Claude to save it as a skill. So I said, can you save as a skill or the AIQ Expert Design Studio coding and the manual and things that you learned before. And it created a skill set. So it will be able to invoke that quicker than me to, have to explain to it, can you code in EDS? It'll know if I say, hey, can you do an EDS strategy for this? It'll know where to go and get the skill set. Some refinement is still needed in those areas. It seemed to have forgotten a couple of things. It was went off on I don't know if it was a hallucination or what it was, and I had to tell it, remind it, to rewrite things correctly. And that's I said that's not correct. The difference is only the format XYZ is and rules blah blah. It doesn't, and it's like, oh yeah, it realized that it had got off on some tangent and was programming like this. You see this here? Choppy action is defined as. Within AIQ EDS, if you know EDS, you know that you can't say that. It has to be just choppy action is. So this was the only thing really that it seemed to have slipped its mind, I guess, as part of the process of developing strategy. So just to let you know, if you're into doing this, and I really am, because it just has been an eye-opener in finding strategies and programming them for me. So what did I do to start with? Let me go back up in here. And what I did was ask it really to create a few things. What we wanted to do was get a strategy. I said, hey, go ahead. I want to trade ETFs. I want to write combination indicators for entries. And it came up with, and I'll just show you these right the way down the bottom here. So while we're trying to read this going by, what it came up with eventually was a bunch of indicators and strategies, which I then fine-tuned a little bit so that it was all in plain English rather than just sending you the code. So number one, it came up with an ATR volatility stop. And so these are strategies for trading, by the way, ETFs just on a short-term swing trading basis using end-of-day data. That's all we're doing. So it came up with the strategies themselves and actually put them into actually 5 or 6. I think it was 5 altogether. So things like ADX trend strength approximation. These are all and they're all got the verbiage in here. Well, we'll just start with this one here because I've worked on 2 of them for you today. So volume weighted momentum. So this was really interesting. So remember, I just said I want to trade ETFs and I want entries. I'm looking for that. I'm not worried about the position sizing or exits at the moment. I just want something to get me into positions that uses multiple indicators, and then I can have those indicators as custom indicators in AIQ. So the first one I looked at was volume weighted momentum. This is an interesting thing. It's not something we have particularly in AIQ. There are volume price indicators, but this one is a volume weighted momentum. So it weights each day's price change by its relative volume. So like a 2% up day on double average volume scores much higher than a 2% up day on half average volume. So this is clever stuff, right? I mean, this is good stuff to be, if you wanted to buy into something that's gaining momentum. Excuse me, I'm going to be click happy with this. I'll get back down here. And then it talks about, the calculation of how it's doing over 5 days and how to use it. So volume accelerating strongest signal. It means the 5-day net score of this, the weighting the volume is positive, improving, and is the biggest value volume weighted up day of the recent period. I mean, this is AI created all of this. It even suggests other indicators to combine it with, paired with Bollinger Bands or a combination 5 breakout system. I mean, this is something else. Let me just scroll down on this. So then it actually codes each of the segments here and puts a comment on it so you know what each segment does. And overall, the idea of this volume accelerating tool is the strongest signal you could expect from this particular system that it's created. But also, it has this ability here. What I like is it's the ability to actually create ourselves an indicator using some of the definitions. So I can actually create an indicator. What I want to see that volume momentum 5-day, right? I want to see it, and I want to see, is it up and what's going on there? So I can create that as an indicator, and then even use the volume momentum accelerating as an entry point because it's created a rule for it as well. Great thing with the AI tools like this, and especially with Claude, it's just got a copy button here. I literally click on this and copy it and pop it into EDS. By the way, Claude actually the first iteration of this experiment, Claude created the EDS files themselves. It actually gave me 5 EDS files to download. And I opened each one of those EDS files and they were empty. And I pointed out to it that you don't know how to encode text inside an EDS file without opening the package like EDS that is the tool that enables you to edit it. So we won't do that mistake again. But it gives you an idea of the power, but also the limitations of the AI tools at the moment. So this one rule, this fourth rule, or this volume momentum one, is the first one, and we're going to look at 2 because that's there's so much you can do with this, and I'm giving you some sort of a framework here. You can go out and do the same thing yourself and create as many strategies and then test them. And this is the great thing about it. It increases our efficiency for testing new systems and creating new indicators. So this is actually the volume momentum, exactly as it created. Very kind of it. Put my name in there. It's got all the information in here. By the way, I asked it to put in plain English, step by step, what is in there. So what it does, how it uses it, and each of the segments within here has an explanation too. So that makes it much easier, because if you just ask it to code it, it will code it without this explanation. So bear that in mind. I say, hey, and you can do this from the get-go. I did it step by step because I like to see. What I first do is I get the rule without all the the verbiage in here. I pop it into EDS, and the first thing I do once it's in here, I just do file and save. And if I do file and save, just as untitled, it doesn't matter. Immediately, our debugger runs through there and we'll find problems. In this volume-weighted one, once I got past that earlier skill set issue, which only took about 30 seconds to fix that, this came in here. It came in here with no error at all, absolutely no errors. So that was a biggie. That's a big one for me because 2 months ago, 5 months ago, it took maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes, an hour sometimes to fix a bunch of strategies so they actually worked. When I say work, the syntax works. This doesn't necessarily mean that this is really a real life perfect indicator / strategy, because it's been coded. It's sure. I mean, you can write great code that doesn't give you an error, but does it do us any good? And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this session and have strategy, but with indicators, because we can build the indicator that is the foundation of this strategy and look at it ourselves and see what it does. So that's what I did here. So the basics of it we've seen. It's a relative volume, and I love the fact that it weights it more for when there's greater volume. And this is all great stuff to have in here. Let me just scroll down to the bottom so you can see what it is it's really looking for. So 2 things in here. Anything that's got an if, of course, if EDS is a rule. So we're looking for a series of events to occur. If they occur, and if that happens, then the rule has fired. And in this strategy that it created, this volume momentum accelerating occurs if the volume weighted momentum over 5 days is greater than 0, and the volume weighted momentum for the 5 days is greater than the previous day's one, and the volume weighted move is greater than volume weighted move 1 day ago. So don't worry too much about that. You can see most of that in here. What I'm interested in is making the indicator so I can see the basis of this is that volume weighted momentum 5. And it's looking for that you can see it up here. It's a 5-day running total of volume weighted moves. Great. You have a positive if it's net bullish over the last 5 and negative if it's net bearish. Easy, right? Easy for us to see. What can we do with that to see that before we do anything else? So what I would do in this case is I've got this strategy. Once I save it, and I'd already done that earlier to save us time, I saved it as a volume weighted momentum. my next step here is this a real indicator that, makes sense in a charting environment? So we pop into our charting area in here. And what I do is I go up to the chart area up here. I go down to settings. I go down to indicator library and EDS indicators. So interesting thing right now is that if you just jumped into Expert Design Studio today and you didn't really know anything about it, and you asked Claude to create this strategy and you popped it in there, you wouldn't have to do any checking whatsoever because it's saved and worked. Your only task at this moment would be to see if this is a strategy that makes any sense, right? So I prepared this earlier, obviously, to make life easier for us. In here, we're doing the volume-weighted momentum. So I already created a custom indicator. So what I'll do is I'm going to delete this and we'll go through the process just so you can see what it is that we're looking for and why we do it this way. So I'll get rid of this. Goodbye, volume-weighted momentum. And we'll come back and add it in. So when I click on add, I have to go and find the strategy. So that EDS file, which we saw was labeled volume-weighted momentum, is right here. So this is the one that Claude has created. I click open. How do I want this custom indicator to look within AIQ? So remember, there was a positive and a negative. It's either above zero or below zero, right? So that's the two things that are in place. It only has, there's one condition, one setup each day is either above or below zero. And because it's a 5-day volume-weighted momentum, we can use a histogram because the histogram will have a zero line. And that's the easiest way for us to see what this looks like. So we'll do that. We'll call it volume-weighted momentum. The next thing I have to do is what part of this particular rule, strategy, this EDS file, is what we're after. Anything that's got a definition within there, you could actually plot. But the one we're after, the one we looked at a moment ago, so let me switch back to that for a second, is this here, the 5-day running total of volume-weighted moves, VW momentum 5. So that is what we want to make into an indicator. So that's the one that I've selected, and I'll click finish, and I'm done. This adds it as an indicator. If you've never done this before, it's down the bottom of the barometer on the right here. It doesn't get a barometer code because it's a custom indicator, and the system doesn't know hasn't been instructed how it works for bullish bearish, but we can see this. Look what you see here. This is really interesting. So remember, if we're looking for volume-weighted momentum, good days, 5-day moving, is a sign that there's a momentum in place, that there's a trend really following. You can see here, when it crosses over the zero line is what we're looking for. It's even better when you get 1 or 2 days in a row and it's going like this. It's pretty interesting to see how this works out. And it's a tool, again, it's something that we don't have as an indicator within AIQ. And to be honest, I have not tested this. The whole purpose of this session was to leap back into the AI and begin the next step of the process, which is not only creating a strategy, which in the past we've been within our wheelhouse of indicators that we knew fairly well, and we were just using the Claude to put them together into a good strategy. Here, it's created a whole new indicator for me that I don't have in AIQ. I don't know how it works, how well it works. I can run Expert Design Studio and do back tests to see if it's worth it for an entry, and that's another step in this process. So you can see here when it's really this is designed, especially if you're in a buying mode, it's designed for being above the zero line is when you get into a stock, and basically that's the way this is looking. The going short side, I don't know. I mean, that's not something. I don't do a lot of shorting. I do put some calls, so I do have plays on the downside. But here I'm using ETFs, and if I'm using ETFs, I'll probably have bullish bearish ETF and leverage bullish and bearish ETF. So I'll probably be looking for the upside on everything. So interesting, you can see it there, right? The volume weighted momentum. This was all done by Claude. I didn't even ask it. I didn't say, hey, go use this indicator and build me, find the correct constants and settings for these indicators that will give me some effective buying points for a short-term or swing trading strategy doing ETFs. You could have done that. I could have done that. But here, all I've done is said, just give me some multiple indicator strategies that I can employ for short-term and swing trading, exchange-traded funds. And so this is where we got to. This is pretty good. So that's volume-weighted momentum, right? That's, it makes good sense. And it's not something that I really thought about, but I know it's out there as a strategy in other areas. There's no doubt about it, but there are lots of strategies out there. So that's, remember, this is just when I instructed Claude to do this, as I say, I said, give me 5, and it gave me 5 combinations. And I've just picked 2 for this session. I can share all of these with you, or you can do your own and go out to Claude and make this happen. By the way, I am using a subscription base on Claude because that gives me pretty much unlimited access to asking questions. And the price, I'm not selling Claude, it's just I'm using it. It's $20 a month. I mean, $20 a month for this tool. That is pretty much, these tools are going to change industry immensely. I mean, across the board, it's already happening. For smaller companies like us and mid-sized companies, deploying software changes, marketing, systems, internal systems, getting that inside our systems here, and maybe getting it into EDS internally at some point could happen much quicker than it could for a larger company. Simply because we don't have that many systems that we have to change. I mean, we are fairly nimble when it comes to moving things around. So I'd love to see, and it might happen, have a Claude button in here that you can just ask it. But that's the simplest form. Really, I mean, let's face it, you can get into Claude and just copy it like I did and dump it into the Expert Design Studio straight away. At some point, and I haven't tried this yet to any extent, at some point I feel the AIs will be able to test strategies like this within defined environments. And I've actually done some of that with one of the AIs and said, hey, what if you use this indicator as a crossover for a buy and exit after 5 days? How effective is this trading strategy? And it will give you some statistics, but it's needs refining more in that environment. But for us, we've got tools already in place that are readily available, spit out results for us every single day. We can view them in charts, so we can we're cutting down on the time for research if we're looking for a new strategy. That's really what this is all about. So that's the first one, and it's already 25 minutes into the session. It's just so much I could show you on this. It's almost like we need a whole day to do some AI stuff, because I spend several hours a week inside here working on different strategies. So all of these things, by the way, these are all saved, by the way. I think you saw that briefly earlier. I'll just share this real quick with you. All your chats are saved in here, so you can always go back to them, and it's easy enough to do. And Claude itself has a large number, a very all of these are like marketing things I'm doing. So I could go back into the search here, and it'll tell me whatever all these things I've done in here. Building trading indicators with AIQ EDS. That's today's one, which I've been working on. I can go straight back into this. And this is the first step that I did earlier today when I tried to create a skill set that didn't really work out all that well for me. And that's why I had to go back and say, hey, you've forgotten some of the things that you did in the past. So let's go back into, let me just do a quick search here. I want to get, let's go to, and that's right, the ETFs one, wasn't it? Nope. Not perfect, that's for sure. Let's go back into chats here. Let's go. Yeah, sometimes it seems to lose track of where it was. Yeah, because that's where we started. But it doesn't matter. I've already prepared it ahead of time just in case you get all these things happening. But you can see how it is feasible to build a trading strategy straight from scratch within Claude and have it decide on the indicators. So the second set of indicators that I took from Claude was for this one here. This one was a consecutive close. So it did 5 for me. It counts how many up closes and down closes have occurred in the last 10 bars. It measures trend quality and consistency rather than just price level of momentum. This is kind of based in indicators that are already out there, but it looks for a healthy uptrend, should close up more often than down, which makes sense, right? And a brief pullback is kind of for the entry point. So how it used, you've got a pullback and an uptrend. That's the primary entry. So it identifies ETFs have been trending up consistently, but have paused briefly. The ideal mean reversion setup. And it also suggests to pair it with something else, which is RSI 2-buy setup, which is another one of the strategies that it's actually created. And that's an RSI 2, which is basically a 2-period RSI, which is incredibly volatile, you could say. It's a little whipsaw, but in combination with this indicator here that it created, it suggests that might be a good place to go. So what we're trying to do is avoid that choppy action. And in here, we're going to have the same type of thing that we had in that first iteration with the volume-weighted momentum. We've got rules here, the true or false on the closed higher. It's going, it does each of the segments and breaks it down, which I really love. And I asked it to do that like I did on the other session, on the other segment. So the things we have here is you've got to count consecutive up is a count of number of how many days of the last 10 days closed higher. Great one, right, to have. And that is something we could build as an indicator, and the number of days that close lower, right? But it's looking for a healthy uptrend if the close up is greater than 6. So already in my mind, I'm going, well, this is nice. So we can make an indicator. Let's just do the bullish side. I mean, consecutive up counts, number of how many of the last 10 bars closed higher. The range will be 0 to 10, right? I mean, that's obviously, it could all be going down. But if it's all going up, then it's going to be 10. So simple enough. But then deciding that a healthy uptrend, and I didn't decide this. I mean, this is Claude, is 6 greater than or equal to 6. I thought, well, we can make an indicator of that. And then we can see that as an indicator. And the rule itself can then be tested at a later date because the rule in here is looking for the segment down here, which is a pullback. Sorry, a pullback. Could be a fallback. When 2 of the last 10 bars close lower. So it's figured all that out as well. So we get the trend, you get the pullback, it's the re-entry. Common one, I mean, pullbacks to 21-day average, all sorts of different ways of getting back into a trend that is in place. This is a trend continuation. This is really what it's after. So how can we make this indicator and pop it into charts so we can see this consecutive up count, and when it cuts over that 6 level? The best way to do this is, again, this rule is saved. So I saved this, by the way, the name, again, I just file and save. I save it as and name the indicator, put it in my EDS strategies folder. And once it's saved in there, if you save it, it runs that debugger, by the way. Again, this one, 2 out of 2, no errors, absolutely no errors during that stage of my having it create the strategies with the verbiage that's in English. The problems I had earlier were quickly corrected. I'm not sure why or where it went wrong, but it doesn't particularly matter. It did go wrong, but we've got past that. And right now, this looks good. It makes perfect sense. That's the other thing. Does it make sense? Okay, so yeah, it does. So by the way, Claude, I mean, if you haven't used just Claude.ai, just sign up for it. It's easy enough to get in there on a free account. You won't be able to do a huge amount. It's a bit like ChatGPT. If you're on the freebie there, you reach a limit fairly quickly if you're using it for a lot of different things. We also have spent some time running strategies in the EDS and fired it through Gemini. The Gemini is a very different tool from Google, and it has it does different things. I haven't really had much in the way of good results because I think Gemini is looking to build from components in different areas where you have more interaction involved in creating, complete strategies. Sometimes when I say strategies for a whole business, building books and things like that. By the way, Claude will build you books too. If you know what you're doing, you'll look at it and edit it. I mean, you can pretty much do anything in the AIs, but you just got to be aware of if you don't have any knowledge or skill set in doing any of this, you don't really know what it is that it's drawing this information from. And I'm pretty sure a lot of this stuff so far has been fairly good common sense. So I'm not too worried about that because I'm obviously been doing this for a long time, and so many of you have too. So back to a consecutive close filter. This is what can we do? Well, let's see if you've got consecutive ups, and you can do the down. But let's look at an indicator. Let's make an indicator of the consecutive up days with that number 6 being the yes, we're in a trend. If we're above that, is that a visual thing that makes sense for us? And so I will go back into the charting area here and back in the chart settings and indicator library, EDS indicators. And I'm going to delete, because obviously I did all this before. This is the consecutive close up that we were just looking at. So we'll get rid of that in there and let's add it in. So remember, this volume and momentum, or momentum as I misspelled, comes from a different file, but you can open up any number of EDS files one at a time in here and create these indicators. They all get remembered. So there's a volume weighted momentum we used earlier. Here's a consecutive close filter. That's the file I saved it at, that code that was flawless from Claude. I'm opening it in here. Now I just have to make a decision how I want to display this. So it's a very simple thing. Remember, it's doing 10 days, so there's only going to have values between 0 and 10. Really, that's all it's going to have, right? Because we're looking at the up days. If I want to do the down days, I can do 0 and 10 on the down day. But let's just look at the upside. So we're just focusing in on 10 consecutive up days. So the best way to do this is actually we can do it. I mean, if I do it with this one here, look at this. This is a histogram with plotted lines. So this was a histogram here with just a 0 line. If I do this one, it asks me for a 2 UDF, which are user-defined functions. I don't have a function that says the number 6, so I won't go with that one. What I can do is I can do either I can do one line with support. So let's have a look at this one. And so I can plot the rule. So it's the consecutive up that we saw. And I can select the support line at 6. And I can call this consecutive up. So we'll just call it up for grins. And when I click finish, let's see what we get. I click done again. And so that adds it down the bottom here. So remember we added that one earlier. That's the one we added earlier. And here's the one we just did, consecutive ups. So isn't this interesting? So this is the line it's suggesting at 6. Once you get to 6 days like that, you're in a trend. But you're not in a trend before that. So this whole period here is a trend. And remember, we're thinking with the lens, it's thinking with the lens of short-term swing trading. So fairly quick moves, a few days, and then you'll be gone. So you wouldn't be in the position or entering in a position here, but you would probably get in when it gets over here. So you notice here, I've also combined the 2 indicators together, although it was suggesting using with the volume weighted momentum, slightly different additional indicator in there. But you can see immediately by what we've done here in just this short session and a little bit of work earlier, I've created 2 indicators that were not within the system. And the 6th day, is that a great day? Well, that's something you could research. Would 7 be you're too late? Is 6 okay? These are all questions that would have to be tested and can be tested because the system itself, we have the code in there. We're ready to go back and actually test all this. We can go and do a test on that. So you can see here right now, both of these indicators are now saved for every chart that comes up. You can see here exactly when you've got a volume weighted momentum occurring. Once it's above the zero line, this is a good time. This is volume weighted momentum. Together here, we're just looking at consecutive closeouts. So it's a slightly different method. This is looking to see, am I buying into a trend or not? Are we into a trend? A much more simple approach here. So these can both be the actual entry points, for the volume weighted momentum. We're looking for an entry point that's, let me get back into that file for you. And it's going to be this one. So what we've done is we grabbed out the indicator component within these strategies to plot it. Because when you actually use the volume weighted momentum as an entry point, you want to use accelerating. So with that accelerating area here, that means that, and you can see here, volume weighted momentum 5 is greater than 0. So remember, we looked at a histogram, the 0 line, so we know it's above 0. But then this looks for it. The volume weighted momentum today is greater than the previous volume weighted momentum 5. And you've got this volume weighted move is greater than volume weighted move 1 day ago. And so this primarily, what this does, it just say, as it gives us the ability to say, okay, in a period of 2 to 3 days, it's above 0 and it's going up. That's really all we're after. So that translates into this, like this here. This is what we're looking for. This is what it says, hey, this is a great time to get into the stock. This is the same, this one here isn't. This here is. So remember, you've got to have the current bar, it's got to be bigger than the previous one. So there are interesting entry points that it fires using this volume weighted momentum. Again, testing this is a matter of doing this. The accelerating is what we're looking for. The indicator just means I can visually look at it when it fires, so I can get a confirmation on the chart. So volume momentum accelerating would be the rule I would use for getting an entry point. You run the rules. Obviously, I put in here all of the components in here. This is the one we're most interested in. I ran this on a database of 1,600 stocks. There are actually 89 stocks that came in. That's quite a few, which will lead me into the next session when we get to this, which will be suggested adding in an ADX 2-day rule as well, which I have, and I'll need to add in there. And again, so that would cull this list down to a lower number. I can run the test just on this if I want to. I can run a back test. I can actually go ahead and say, well, this is fantastic. I don't need anything else. So what I'll do is I'll do a new back test. So once I'm on this, this particular column here, which is the acceleration, is our entry point, I can then test it and say, hey, let's go back. We're buying long, right? This is the long side. I'm going to compare it to what's buying the market. And I can test it back for 24 months and get in at the next open. That's fine. So this is how I exit. This is a little more finesse in here. And I'll just, I'm just putting these in here. This is not something I'm suggesting at the moment because you can exit through various ways. I just want to show you the test. This is the next step. We haven't refined it. We haven't got a secondary confirmation yet. I'm just testing it right now. You can see all the stocks flying by at the bottom here. But this will be, so if, in our next iteration on this, and I might do this actually later on this month, is we'll get the next one, the ADX2 in there. And I'm just going to run it into an EDS and see what it's like for back testing. So, this is, we're not exactly going to have the capability, right, to do this many trades. And 12,894 winners, 4,175 losers. Don't worry about the average profit and loss and for SPX versus the strategy, because we didn't even think about how we're going to exit. I just threw in some real basic money, very loose money management techniques. But it's got a lot more winners than losers. That's a pretty decent ratio right there. So average period for trade, that's only based upon my money management. I'd be in much shorter than that. I'd probably be in for 3 days. So, but you can see, obviously, there's the strategy actually fires and it works, and there's a lot of different trades that can go into that. So again, let me just recap on how this is. This is Claude. I asked it, I want to trade ETFs, like a swing trader, short-term trader. I actually told it, that I'd only have like $20,000 to put into this strategy, and I didn't tell it how many trades I could enter in there. You could do some restrictions like that, but I don't think that's necessary at this stage because we're just looking for a rule and an indicator. I'm asking it to find indicators, and I did say to it, I'm looking for an indicator that I don't have in AIQ Trading Expert Pro. I did ask it that. So that's why, we've got some interesting things coming out. And it's not that, the indicators in AIQ aren't great. They are some great indicators there, but it's just, I'm looking to expand the horizons, to get an edge, right? That's what we're all after. So that's it for today. If you've got any questions, pop them in chat and I will attempt to answer them for you. This has been recorded, of course, and we have the AI in there. It does a decent summary of the whole session, and then the AI video editor even goes in there and edits out my ums and weirdness, which is cool. So we'll have that available for you probably tomorrow, and I'll get that emailed out. And obviously, we got about 40 people who don't come in; they just wait for the recording. Can't be here, listen to live. So I really appreciate everybody being in here. It's been, it's really quite interesting to go ahead and use AIs like this with an understanding that the hallucination thing is real. I mean, there's been some pretty strange things that have come out in some of the voyages I've had within the different AIs, and we've tried maybe 5 or 6 different iterations. When I say iterations, I'm talking about there really aren't that many real AIs out there. You have obviously the one in X, you've got Meta, you've got the Google, the Gemini, you've got Claude. You can see 1,000 different AI tools out there with different names, but a lot of them are based foundations on some of the real main AIs. And, there are obviously more coming up, and there will be, and it's getting more and more complicated out there. But I think you can see it's a tool that helps us in deciding what we want to do for future trading. Well, great. If there are no questions, I will get this recording out to you and talk to you again soon. Thanks for tuning up, and I appreciate you being here.